Hello and welcome to the Growing Healthy Families podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Haggerty. On this show, I interview the world's top health experts so that you can know with certainty what it takes to give your family a life of epic health and wellness.
As parents, we don't want to see our kids struggle. I knew that he had the potential. I knew that something needed to be done.
I was 18, unplanned pregnancy, didn't know what to do. Do we keep the child? Do we not?
For us, one of our goals always is to try and make sure that we're here.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Scott Haggerty here for the Growing Healthy Families podcast. And moms and dads, if you're watching this today, it is my absolute pleasure to spend some time with this amazing mom, Michelle. So I'm super excited for this because she's got a really, really cool story to share with you guys about some really cool changes that her family has seen. So as we dig right in, Michelle, I just want to thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Sure, pleasure.
So, Michelle, obviously we've known each other for some time now, and
Yes.
we've had a chance to get to know your amazing family. And so, obviously, when we met, your family was living with some challenges. Would you mind explaining to the viewers
Sure.
kind of what life was like when we first met?
Well, at the time, my son was experiencing some behavioral challenges at school, mostly. Things such as difficulty following directions, difficulty completing tasks, low frustration tolerance, and anger outbursts. And life was definitely difficult, to say the least. I mean, it was hard as a mom to see him struggle through the demands and the expectations of school. And as much as we tried to kind of advocate for more resources at school, they were kind of reaching their limit, and it was just very stressful.
I know I remember when we had the first conversation, some of the concerns that you'd said is that you were at that breaking point
Yes.
with school, if I remember correctly.
Very much so, yeah, because I mean, one of the things that brought me into Elite was that the school was contemplating outside placement, and that was such a shock for us, and that just put us in complete stress mode. Because again, as a mom, as parents, we don't want to see our kids struggle, and I knew that he had the potential, and I knew that something needed to be done, and then we came here, and that's when the magic happened.
So let's talk about,
Sure.
obviously we talked about school life. What was home life like?
To be honest with you, home life wasn't that crazy. It wasn't that disruptive. Because again, the demands that are at home are drastically different than at school. So it wasn't until he experienced that transition from preschool to kindergarten, going 5 days a week, full day, and the demands of that nature really triggered a lot of the behavioral issues. So to be honest with you, at home wasn't really that much of an issue as it was at school.
Sure. And that's honestly where a lot of parents will really have first signs that there's something that's the child is struggling with, because it tends to be the trigger of the overwhelm and the amount of things are being demanded upon, the time, the energy that's required.
Right.
And if there's not enough in the tank mentally, physically, and emotionally to handle that, it can trigger some pretty significant outbursts, right?
Yes.
So when we first met, I remember some of the conversations that we had, but one of the bigger concerns you expressed to me was the fact that he would go 0 to 60 really fast.
Right.
And that was something that was becoming a bigger issue at school, is that correct?
Yes, very much so. I mean, we got to the point where this is a child that at home, he has 2 younger siblings, so his interaction was always just very soft-spoken and, normal child behavior. And it was such a shock for us as parents to hear that he was having those explosions to the point where he was getting aggressive, and we never saw that. So that was a great concern for us, and we obviously knew something was triggering him to the point where we didn't even know who our child was anymore, at least at school. So that was really concerning for us as parents.
Yeah. Do you remember what it was, how you first came across Elite?
I will never forget, because it was just one of those days, like I know the moms can relate, where you're just like, you're stressed, you just want to kind of vegetate on the couch, and I was going through my phone, and your face popped up on Facebook. And I just kind of was like, oh, this is interesting. And I kind of was looking at probably one of these iPods, or podcasts, and it just resonated so much with what I was going through. And as soon as I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go contact them, because I was at that point where I needed help and I needed it fast. And I called, and from the moment, honestly, from the initial contact with the Elite staff to talking with you, it was just that genuine warmth and that concern of just the well-being of my child. And just to feel that validation and being understood as a parent, it meant everything. So it was so helpful.
Well, for us, one of our goals always is to try and make sure that, we're here as a resource for you. And I know we've talked about that a number of times, that, many times moms and dads will come into us and they're in a place where oftentimes it's crisis mode.
Yeah. For sure.
So we've always taken the mindset with every person that we work with, that we want to try and help to be a catalyst for getting the resources that your child needs, but also helping to give you resourcing so you know what can be done and how things can move forward, so that we can have a plan. Right. And I know that we worked quite a bit together, didn't we, in the very beginning?
And I think that's just to go along with that. What helped, and when I say understood and validated, is that I'll never forget, after our initial assessment conversation over the phone, as soon as I hung up, I got so overwhelmed with emotion because I finally felt like understood, because the way that you were able to identify the impact of, in our case, the early childhood health problems that we had and how it was currently impacting his behavior and development, it made so much sense. It was almost like an aha moment. And also the fact that you were able to immediately start that communication with the schools, that was so important for us because, again, we were on the verge of like outside school placement. And with a short period of time, you were able to provide that with that great support, contact, communicate with the IEP team, let them know exactly what to expect from my son, expectations, thing changes, skills and tools to implement at school. And they were grateful. We worked all together as a team. I mean, the fact that you even went the extra mile to kind of do like offer a follow-up, that was monumental. It was a life changer.
One of the things I give a lot of credit to the staff too is that they were so open.
Yes.
Because that's oftentimes one of the bigger struggles is getting the entire team on the same page.
Yes.
But the fact that you had a team of people that were so willing to just do what was necessary to get your son to the best place, right? And so I think that lends a lot of credence to the fact that they were really invested in his success, and that's really important.
Yeah,
because
they were so receptive to your suggestions, which was great.
They were, which was awesome. So obviously, stepping forward, as we get in the process, when we got together and we started talking about what care was going to look like, what made you decide that this was something that you wanted to give a try?
Honestly, it was just at that point where I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. I mean, we had exhausted other measures and other resources. And again, the school was reaching it to that point where they wanted to help, but they just couldn't they were running out of resources at the school. So we just decided this was something that we could look into. And again, nothing to lose, everything to gain. And that exactly was the case for us.
That's awesome to hear. And, for those of you who are watching this, one of the things that we've talked about, and I repeat the same thing a lot, but I think it's important that we speak on this point because, what you talked about with the role of early trauma, birth process, and what that does and how it can create a cascade of events that can trigger this ongoing perpetual fight or flight response in the child's nervous system and what it does. The reason why, moms and dads, if you're watching this and you're wondering why maybe your child has not turned the corner with, IEPs or outside OT or therapies or behavioral counseling, oftentimes you're dealing with two different things, right? There is a reflexive behavior and a learned behavior. You can't change learned until you change reflex, right? You have to change the input, the way the brain receives whatever you're trying to do, whatever type of therapy it is. And if you change that, right, then you'll get an output difference. But the brain has to change so that it can have a different output type. Does that make sense when I say that?
Yeah, and I'll never forget, it's almost like that metaphor of pumping the brakes, like you were saying. And that totally made sense because he wasn't able to process because he was so at a stressed mode that he wasn't able to process and kind of fully digest all the information that was coming at him in an academic setting, which is why he was in such a stress mode and he was having these outbursts.
Yeah. That's a great point too, because, oftentimes I think one of the things that a lot of people really kind of struggle with is that we all want better behavior, right? But what you talked about there with the perception is really a critical thing because ultimately the function of the nervous system, first and foremost, is to perceive. And then it coordinates a response to anything in the environment. But if you change the perception, change the input, then you can start altering the output, which is in turn pumping the brakes, getting the brain to start to slow down, and then give it an ability to perceive things from a different place.
Right.
So Michelle, when we got in care, and we're future pacing a little bit, and you started going through the process and you were doing your visits, when did you start noticing changes in your son?
Honestly, pretty quickly. I mean, I remember starting around this time last year, like around the springtime. It was March, more or less. And by the end of the school year, he ended on a great note. He was a different child. I mean, everyone, especially at school, which is a lot of the behavioral issues were flaring up there, noticed it. And they were just so proud of his progress. Just specifically just an overall calmness to him, where he was able to actually listen and process, any of the directions that he needed to do at school or at home, and really absorb the information in a calmer manner.
It's funny. I remember back when he first started, where even just something as simple as getting him adjusted, trying to get him to calm down, and just to get through the few minutes that it took was a struggle for him at the beginning, right? And it's funny, obviously when he comes in for his adjustments, now he's easy peasy, laid back, totally relaxed, But the other thing that I really just kind of looking back to where he is now versus where he was then is the way that he's able to articulate so differently.
Yes.
When he first came in, his thoughts seemed very scattered and erratic. And now he's just very linear, very clear-cut thoughts, very good ability to articulate what he thinks and feels.
Sure, definitely. And we've noticed that both at school and at home, and that instead of the outburst, he's able to verbalize his feelings, good or bad, but he's able to say it in a way where it's in a very healthy manner.
And that's a huge thing. I mean, so many kids struggle with that ability, and oftentimes there is a neurological barrier to that, right? And you obviously know quite a bit about the way the brain works, but for those of you who don't, there has to be this balance between both sides of the brain, because they regulate each other. They regulate personality. They help us to be able to coordinate thought processes, and oftentimes put the brakes on when we shouldn't be doing things that are impulsive behaviors, telling us what consequences are. And it's the ability of the brain to integrate and bring those things into play that help us to be able to get better output behaviors, better social interactions, understanding of social norms and consequences, and recognizing cues and being able to organize our thoughts and be able to maintain focus. All of those things happen as the brain slows down and we make a shift, right? And we talk about the autonomics as being kind of the regulator of it, but that's an important thing. Because moms and dads, if you don't understand what the autonomic nervous system is, if the brain's the master control system, the autonomics are like the air traffic controller, right? They're the ones who regulate the output, how the body and the brain are interacting with one another at all times. When the fight or flight system is too active, we get protective behaviors, right? Which is shorter temperament, outbursts, oftentimes aggression. As the brain balances, we start seeing thoughtfulness, calm overtaking a child, or us as adults, right? But seeing the organization of the way that we think and changes in speech output as the brain is slowing down, calming down, and then starting to work the way that it should.
Sure.
Right?
And also another note is that we've also noticed that flexibility in his thinking, which is such a huge factor when interacting with his siblings and with his classmates. I mean, before he used to be a little rigid, and now he is able to try new things, negotiate better, better turn taking, and those are crucial skills for his social development too.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is critical for all of us, right?
Yeah.
But especially at such a young age when we're learning those critical behaviors, right? And so being able to see that type of a change is really that's profound.
Yes, totally.
That's awesome. So I'd like you to think back. Okay. And so when we first went through the process, we had our consult. We had the first talk.
Right.
We did the exam. We got the scans, and then we sat together and we did the report.
Right.
And in those moments, right, we all have a million different things running through our head. And a lot of people who watch this are probably thinking, is this something that can help my child? If you were talking to yourself back now nearly a year ago, and you had to say some words of wisdom to yourself,
Yes.
what would you say?
Honestly, very simple. just trust the process. It could be very overwhelming. Again, like Dr. Scott mentioned, you're coming in stress mode, and you have probably tried tons of resources. And one of the things that helped us is that we were willing to give it a try. We trusted, and we were patient, and we saw the progress. So honestly, again, just trust the process, be patient, and progress will come.
That's awesome. So I thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Michelle, I've been looking forward to doing this for quite some time.
Yes.
Because to be quite honest, you know, watching the transformation in your son has been just, as his doctor, I've loved to see it because he's such a wonderful boy.
Thank you.
And our Star Wars talks that we have every week,
I know.
I look so forward to those, right? But, you know, it makes my heart happy
Yes.
to go and see the awesome little man that has come out. And he was already awesome, but more awesomeness.
Yes.
You know, and to see obviously how he seems like he's happier, calmer. And I can only imagine the impact that he sees every day in school. And so I thank you.
Yes.
I thank you for
thank you.
Well, I thank you for being courageous. I thank you for, you know, investing the time and the energy and everything that you've done into helping your son, because it says so much about you and your family and the way that you love your son. So God bless you guys. That's amazing.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So this is Dr. Scott. Thank you so much for being here with us today on the Growing Healthy Families podcast. If you have questions, do me a favor. I want you to go and put them in the comments beneath. Or you can go to our direct messenger and send us messages through there. If you have questions about something relating to something we talked about today, then make sure you put it in there so we can address it, or maybe we can turn it into another episode for you. This is Dr. Scott. God bless you guys. Be elite. Thank you for listening to the Growing Healthy Families podcast, the world's #1 source for health education. Make sure to go to iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a review. Make sure to follow us on social media at the links listed in the show notes, and let us know what area of health you are struggling with so we can get you and your family on the road to epic health.